As Turkey's ruling Justice and Development Party prepares for a major shake-up, we ask, what changes are we going to see? Where's Turkey at after a decade of the same leadership? And what challenges lie ahead for this regional power? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Laura Kyle. With great fanfare, Turkey's Justice and Development Party, or AK Party, opened its 4th Congress in Ankara on Sunday. In a sports arena in the capital, where the red carpet was renamed the Path of Democracy, the party's leader and Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan addressed tens of thousands of supporters and foreign dignitaries. The event was celebrating a decade of electoral success, strong economic growth and rising regional power. It was Erdogan's last Congress as AK Party chairman, and he's widely expected to be running for president in 2014. In a 2.5-hour speech, Erdogan said the era of military coups is over and Turkey is a model for other Muslim countries to emulate.
Before we came to power in 2002, there were no economic stability, no safety, no democracy in this country. We have been alone in our fight against terrorism, in our process of democratization. We are determined to solve the Kurdish issue despite provocations and attrition campaigns against the government. The Kurdish question cannot be solved by those who hug terrorists, but those who hug the nation. We took over $23.5 billion of debt. As of now, we have $1.3 billion of debt, and we will cut it to zero in April.
Well, joining us now from Istanbul is Al Jazeera's Anita McNaught. Anita, quite a spectacular show there. Talk us through the events of the day.
Well, this was a display of Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan's popular power. He is a hugely popular but also a controversial leader. He's an extremely strong figure in Turkey and therefore a polarizing one. But this event was not about announcing new initiatives, tweaks to policies, new policies. This was about consolidating and celebrating the power of the AK Party and its almost unprecedented achievement in Turkish politics, and also pointing out, showcasing quite how central the personality of Recep Tayyip Erdogan is in the middle of all of this. So a celebration of what they've achieved, gliding over smoothly the things they haven't achieved, not addressing the possible threats, challenges that they have regionally to their hard-won achievements, and to some extent too pinning the blame for their failures on parties outside of AK itself, which many people in Turkey will say is not entirely fair. What you can't deny today, what you can't deny in this event, this event on Sunday, is the enormous popularity of the Prime Minister, the enormous emotional hold he has over his supporters. People quite genuinely and unforced were weeping in that audience, men and women. And his entire speech, which included 4 poetry readings and some music, played quite unapologetically on the emotions and deep felt hopes, fears and sorrows of the Turkish people who were there to celebrate his 11 years in power.
And so, Anita, what do you think was achieved by the Congress that was held today?
Well, as I said, they aren't going to announce new policy initiatives in something like this. So what they have to point out, what they have to celebrate, if you like, is the central role of Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He's got plans, you see, Laura. He has to leave the position of Prime Minister because under party rules, he gets 3 terms and then he has to go. But the party don't want to lose him as a political force, and he's not ready to leave politics, rumours of poor health notwithstanding. Now, he's got a grander plan, and that involves a sort of Putin-esque style maneuver into an enhanced presidential position. But he needs to convince many people in his party that that is the right thing to do, not the least because that same rule that takes him out of the prime ministership also takes many deputies out of their position as MPs. That's created some grumblings in the back seats, as you might expect, although bringing fresh blood in is always a good idea. So it's looking a bit, in some quarters, like he's all right, but some other people who've helped him get where he is aren't going to be all right? And also, is a Putin-esque style maneuver, one that sees him take over the presidency, going to be the right thing for the party? And if the party does feel, as he said in his speech, that we're the party not just of the people who voted for us, but we're the party of the whole of Turkey, and he said, I will never leave you as long as I am in good health, I will always be there with you in some role. Does the party feel that a move towards an eternal Erdogan, and therefore a kind of eternal all-encompassing AK, is a good move for Turkey? Some of his critics are already comparing the party's manoeuvres to the Ba'ath Party, the Syria and Iraqi-style Ba'ath Party that absorbed opposition movements rather than fighting fairly with them.
OK, Anita McNaught, thank you very much for joining us there from Turkey. Well, to discuss this now further, we're joined by our guests in Ankara, Aykan Erdemir, Member of Parliament from the opposition's Republican People's Party, or CHP. In Istanbul, Yavuz Baydar, columnist at the Turkish newspaper today's Zaman. Also in Istanbul, Ekrem Eddy Guzeldere, political analyst for the European Stability Initiative. Welcome to all of you. First, Yavuz Baydar, as we heard there from our correspondent Anita, this Congress was all about consolidating power of the AK party. Do you think that was achieved?
That seems to be an accurate description. For the AKP voters, its grassroots, the people who supported the party throughout the decade, it's certainly been a celebration of a very important political success story from their vantage point, also for Turkey. For the others, I think for the entire nation, it's a new threshold of where the politics is going to develop from now on. From 1st of October, from tomorrow, Turkey is entering a new phase after a very interesting, exciting journey, if you will, bumpy at times, but soft transition nevertheless. And this is a new period we are facing, and AKP supporters understandably feel proud of the strength of their party, which is still surfing above 50%, according to the 4 or 5 polls recently taken.
OK, in the course of this discussion, we'll look at the future and how the party is moving forward in just a moment. First of all, Aykan Erdemir, do you think it was fair for such a large celebration? Do you agree that the AK party is indeed the party for the whole of Turkey?
For Western audiences, the party congress was quite different than the congresses of democratic political parties, because what we saw was a monologue by the increasingly authoritarian Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and there was no debate, there was no negotiation, there were no candidates, and there was no contestation within the party. So this was a party congress where there was no sign of intra-party democracy, and it was more a performance stage than a party congress. And the performance stage was for the display of the strong leadership of Prime Minister Erdogan and his increasingly growing personality cult.
Ekrem Eddy Guzeldere, clearly we've got two very opposing views of the Congress seen in Turkey on Sunday. What's your reaction to it?
And of course, after 10 years in power with an absolute majority and being re-elected last year with 50%, the party feels more powerful than ever, and this was partly celebrated. Of course, there's now the question is what will happen after this Congress and what will happen until 2013 regional elections, 14 presidential elections, and 15 again parliamentary elections. And there are still many question marks, because the Congress did not deliver so much content-wise. Erdogan read from an 85-page book, but there was not much new, and there still has to be seen what will be the future direction of the party.
So do you think that it's grown too powerful, that it may have been a victim of its own success? I mean, it has been accused of wanting to play both the governing and the opposition role at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, this is one criticism, and of course the party has changed in the course of the past 10 years, especially during the first 3 or 5 years from 2002 to 2005 to 2007, the party still had lots more opposition from the judiciary and the armed forces, and was therefore also more open to work together with opposition parties, to work with intellectuals outside the parliament, to try to build alliances and coalitions to strengthen its position. Now, since especially 2009, 2010, the opposition from the judiciary and the armed forces is mainly gone, and the party is more powerful than ever. And I think what was an advantage in the first two election periods, being the party with an absolute majority, has now turned into a negative effect, that the party doesn't need anybody to negotiate with, and plays very much more on this authoritarian situation.
Mr. Aykan Erdemir, would you suggest that the opposition poses any viable alternative, that your party should be partly to blame perhaps for the AK Party's rise?
In authoritarian or increasingly authoritarian regimes, the role of opposition is both very important and also very challenging. And we see this not only in Turkey, but we also see this in Russia, in Venezuela, and in other authoritarian countries. And part of the story is that for opposition forces, including political parties, NGOs, and grassroots initiatives, there is not much room to maneuver. There is not much air to breathe. And from another perspective, there is also the problem of increasing government repression of opposition through the use of strong arm tactics, such as police and military, as well as a judiciary that's increasingly less and less impartial.
What's your response to that, Mr. Yavuz Baydar, that the government is increasing its repression of the opposition? Indeed, it's been compared, as we heard from our correspondent, to Syria's Ba'ath Party.
Certainly opposition has a point in that. This story, I mean, one possible version of, or part of the story, AKP story, is that it began as a party with strong Islamist roots, Islamist elements, and then continued, as it continued with the increasing globalism, European Union, accession process, a lot of trade, it became a post-Islamist party. But the real question and real challenge for about 4 or 5 years now, whether or not this party would be, in a Western European sense, if you will, would be a Muslim Democrat party, just exactly as we speak about Christian Democrat movements and parties in the West. It hasn't reached there yet. Its greatest challenge and its greatest unknown before the entire electorate of Turkey is whether or not this party will gain that identity. That will mean a completion of a soft transition process. And as Erdogan, sole, single, powerful, popular, charismatic leader, emotional leader, tightens his grip on the party, which again, back to the consolidation of personal power, the risks are increasing before it takes a new leap after today. And the risk is certainly whether or not it will become more arbitrary in management, in a sense that it becomes more visibly authoritarian in its rule. And as we see, the mood is slightly changing in Turkey, because as the longer Erdogan as a person, as a leader, stands unchallenged in this asymmetrical competition in politics, the risks are high that Turkey would, in a worst type of scenario, shift towards a sort of a Singaporean or Malaysian type of rule. But the alternative, more positive scenario is that Turkey, exactly like Tories or Christian Democrats once upon a time under Kohl, or more exactly in Japan, like a 50-year-long Liberal Democrat Party rule, would become a ruling popular party, but still maintain its goal in normalizing the conditions in Turkey by achieving a completely new constitution, which is the hope of more than 70% of the population, and solve the Kurdish conflict forever, so that the bloodshed is finished, and then there is peaceful coexistence between the uneasy segments of this society, which are the main population, Turks, Sunnites, and Kurds.
Okay, Ekrem Eddy Guzeldere, I suppose the direction of the party, questions over the direction of the party may well be addressed later in this Congress when the shake-up is announced. What changes do you think we're likely to see?
And of course, one part of the change will be that a lot of the personnel has to change according to the own AK Party statutes, that MPs who have been 3 times in parliament, they cannot run for a 4th time. And that is affecting more or less 70 MPs. So there will be a change to the parliamentary group, but also to the highest organs of the party. And of course, it is then decisive who will be in these organs and who will be in decisive positions, also to influence the direction of the party. But the main issues that were already mentioned, like the new constitution and the Kurdish issue, we have not seen any or little progress during the past 2 years, and it's questionable whether after this Congress the party will again negotiate with also opposition parties, civil society, public intellectuals to come to an agreement on a new so-called civilian constitution, and also to come to again tangible results concerning the Kurdish issue.
We heard there earlier from our correspondent that the Congress was not used to address any of the AK Party's failures, and indeed Turkey has had to deal with several issues. Just days ago, 3 top generals were convicted of masterminding a plot to overthrow the government. More than 300 Turkish military officers were involved. Turkey has also been in a long war with the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK. The PKK rebels have stepped up their attacks in recent months as they push for a separate Kurdish state. Turkey also faces a potential threat from Syria, and adding to its economic burden, Turkey's refugee camps now hold around 80,000 people from Syria. Aykan Erdemir, the recent polls show that more than half of Turks asked felt that the government was not dealing adequately with the PKK or the Syria issue. Would you agree?
Yes, I think both the Kurdish crisis and the Syrian crisis are top of the list of failures of Prime Minister Erdogan. When it comes to the Syrian crisis, Turkey used to be a peace builder and conflict resolution power in the region. But lately, Turkey is no longer a source of stability in the region, but it is one of the main reasons for instability in the region. And Erdogan's, what we consider to be sectarian style, is behind it. The Republican People's Party, for example, advocates an all-inclusive process that brings in all the legitimate stakeholders in Syria to the democratization process. When it comes to the Kurdish issue, once again, we have advocated an inclusive, participatory and transparent process, and we have consistently have done so. On the contrary, Prime Minister Erdogan has changed his policy and discourse numerous times, and often reverted to inflammatory and provocative language concerning the Kurdish problem, accusing both Peace and Democracy Party and the Republican People's Party. We believe there is no solution to the Kurdish problem through the use of such inflammatory and provocative language.
Okay, Yavuz Baydar, if I just to give you a chance to jump in there and respond to that. Do you think that's true? Is it fair that Erdogan has changed his policy towards the Kurds, that this rising use of inflammatory language is the reason for Turkey now seeing a rise in attacks, a sharp rise in attacks by PKK rebels?
Well, it has been a sort of a flip-flopping since 2005 approximately, because Erdogan realized the more time passed that his greatest challenge in this now 10-year-old journey is how to tackle the Kurdish issue and the PKK violence. And this has proven to be a very tough nut for him. And he has, pragmatist as he is, tried various ways. And there has been very many obstacles from his management style, but as also from the PKK, from the Kurdish political movement, etc. And the trust that was necessary to overcome obstacles has never been established by the parts, and mistrust reigns still in that domain, as much as it also controls the rather disturbing relations between the government and the main opposition, because this is mainly a national issue, and these two parties that can be key together to resolve this issue forever cannot get along very well, because there is deep mistrust there as well. So the issue, the longer the violence continues and escalates, the ground under the AKP, as much as the entire politics, civilian politics, starts shattering, because people do not want to hear bad stories every day of killings, casualties, murders, etc., etc. So Erdogan now stands before a very critical choice as he proceeds towards a sort of a presidential system which he dreams about, whether or not he will be taking the bull by the horn and continue the path of peaceful resolution, or shift towards, as he did in the past 10 months approximately, towards a more hardline, rigidly eye-to-eye type of approach, which is, of course, appeasing the ultranationalists. So he stands before a very critical watershed now, and it's a sort of an existential choice that he will have to make before starting to sail towards a presidency, which is still far ahead by Turkish standards.
Okay, Mr. Guzeldere, do you think it will be good for Turkey if Erdogan does become president in 2014?
If there's the choice between Erdogan and Gül concerning the AKP, then not only myself, but a large percentage of the population would prefer Gül as president. There was a recent survey showing that Gül would get more than 50% and Erdogan only 22%. I think that as the system is right now, and not a presidential system, the president is rather representative and comparable to what his role and position is in Germany, and not so much as it is in the States and France. So to have a party politician is already problematic, but to have a person that is polarizing so much, that is often aggressive in his temper towards the opposition, that has a clear stance in party politics, is not the most appropriate person to stand above all parties and represent a large majority of the population. In contrast, Mr. Gül is a lot more soft-spoken, is easier in also getting in contact with opposition and with public intellectuals that are not close to the AKP, and is much more accepted also outside the hardcore of the AKP voters. But since the two have had a political life of 20-30 years together, they won't run against each other, so there will be either Erdogan and Gül, and then the question, of course, is who will be the candidate of the main opposition party, but also how many other candidates will there be, and how much will the electorate be divided on the issue.
Indeed. Okay, Aykan Erdemir, the last word to you. Would you be happy, would the opposition be happier with another term for Abdullah Gül in president?
Now, the latest poll shows that the Turkish public is overwhelmingly more comfortable with Gül, and I think the logic behind that is Prime Minister Erdogan initially represented a compromise, a trade-off for the Turkish public between democracy and stability. As we know, during times of economic crisis, and back in 2001, Turkey was undergoing such an economic crisis, authoritarian leaders emerge as attractive alternatives, and people can often trade off democracy for an authoritarian stability. But after 10 years of Justice and Development Party rule, people seem to be quite tired of the increasingly authoritarian nature of Erdogan's rule. And I think that is in part the reason why in the latest poll, Gül received more than twice the amount of support as Erdogan.
Thanks very much to our guests for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. In Istanbul, Yavuz Baydar; in Ankara, Aykan Erdemir; and also in Istanbul, Ekrem Eddy Guzeldere. And thanks to you too for watching. If you want to send us your comments, do drop us a line at insidestory@aljazeera.net. See you next time.